Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Celtic Way. I am your host, John McGinley. I'm joined by Ryan McGinley. Not been on the briefing for a while. I've been in various other places over the last few days, Ryan. So I'm glad to be back this morning. How are you doing this fine Thursday?
Things are good, and I'm good because we're one day closer to the return of Celtic, the international break. As I've been saying in a couple of these podcasts in the morning, I'm just delighted that we've seen the back of the international break. It was kind of a mixed break in terms of players playing, players maybe not playing, picking up injuries here and there, but it's the return of Celtic at the weekend against Dundee, and it's a really busy time for the club. So looking forward to getting into it and talking about some more Celtic today.
Yeah, there's plenty of issues going around. There's various fan subplots continuing, Ryan. We'll talk a bit
Yeah.
about the team and the build up to the weekend in a moment. But just over the last 24 hours or so, it became apparent that the two major Celtic fan ultra groups won't be attending the upcoming semi final against Rangers, League Cup semi final at Hampden. Now, this has obviously elements of dissatisfaction with how Celtic are going about their business at the moment, but it seems to be primarily because of the SPFL's decision to reduce Celtic's allocation by 500 fans as a result of pyrotechnics that were set off in last year's Premier Sports Cup, the League Cup. And as a result, that allocation was cut. The Green Brigade say they didn't receive any allocation, but that I think they've had this before, Ryan, where they've had their allocation cut previously and they haven't
Yeah.
been officially allowed to go to Hampden or other places, but they've found a way to get in the stadium. They're essentially saying they're not going to do that this time. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to read out the statements from both groups. We'll discuss it a little bit and then discuss the kind of wider fan issues at the moment because, as I say, it is all rumbling on and there is more developments and more meetings planned. So the Ultras group Boys say they explained their position, saying last year the Scottish Professional Football League introduced yet another short-sighted anti-fan initiative in their as of yet unsuccessful attempt to limit the use of pyrotechnics in football stadiums in Scotland. The disciplinary process involves cutting the ticketing allocation given to clubs with no clear reasoning or logic on which matches are affected. It has been confirmed that for our match against Rangers in the League Cup semi-final on the 2nd of November, both sets of fans will have their allocations cut by 500 tickets as punishment for the use of pyrotechnics in various Premiership and League Cup matches last year. While there are differing views on the use of pyrotechnics in stadiums, it is our view that collective punishment of hundreds of fans, in all cases substantially more than those involved in the use of pyrotechnics, is yet another draconian anti-football fan move that damages the game in Scotland and sets a precedent that we do not wish to normalise. They continued, this is particularly important as, rather than work in conjunction with the supporters, the footballing authorities have instead introduced a punishment designed to have fans turn against each other. We maintain that draconian sanctions offer no long-term solution to this perceived problem. As with all fan issues, this can only be found through positive engagement and open dialogue with supporters. As a result, we as a group will not be in attendance at the League Cup semi-final, despite on this occasion the ban not being enforced against our tickets. We refuse to entertain business as usual while supporters of both clubs are unfairly penalised. So that's what the boys' perspective on things, Ryan. They're saying they're not going, even though they didn't have their allocation cuts, they've not been banned from Hampden, etc., etc. They're still choosing not to go, and primarily a result of this SPFL initiative. Now, we won't get bogged down into the debate around pyrotechnics. I think that's been done to death, and as they allude to, there have been various views about the use of pyrotechnics and what should be done to clamp down on it or not done. Some people think that nothing really should be done too. That there's definitely two camps in that debate. But they're showing solidarity to their fellow fans that they see as being punished, and to an extent they're right about obviously the use of pyro, it's not 500 people, for example, that were using pyro last year at Hampden, and that has to be noted. And so I think that they feel aggrieved that this concept of collective punishment, which we've seen rolled out across UEFA at times, and it's a new thing in Scottish football. I think the SPFL have made it clear they're going to be cracking down on the use of pyrotechnics, regardless of the public debate about them. And I could see this continuing. I don't think they're going to be, they're not going to be perturbed by people not enjoying the concept of collective punishment, Ryan. But it's a difficult situation for supporters who aren't using pyrotechnics.
Yeah, and it's a lot of supporters getting tarred with the same brush as the people that are actually setting off. And I think that's where the main problem lies. There'll be people that were just there to watch the game, and because they're involved with a certain group, they're automatically tarred and punished, despite not having a part to play in the setting off of these pyrotechnics. Like you, I don't want to get in a debate about it. Everybody's got an opinion on pyro in Scotland. You would think, or it would seem, but I just look at it in the wider. I just look at it in the lens of the game, the upcoming game. The fact that the boys won't be there, the fact that we'll get on to talking about the Green Brigade's statement, but the fact that they won't be there as well, that has a knock-on effect to the atmosphere, because it's quite difficult sometimes to get an atmosphere going at Hampden, having a designated fan group or fan groups, ultras, that are making noise, that are orchestrated, that are keeping in time and keeping in tune with everything. Not having them there automatically. And Rangers will struggle with that as well, the fact that they've lost 500 tickets, I believe, for their ultras group. But yeah, that lack of I know it's a wider issue, and I know the pyrotechnics, it's a big debate, but just looking at it from a fan's perspective, I do feel sorry for the fans that weren't involved and have yet still been punished and will miss out on a semi-final, a Glasgow derby semi-final, because of the use of pyrotechnics by, 5, 6, 7 people in an orchestrated manner, just because it was that group.
Yeah, my personal feeling on it is that it just, action like this just further entrenches people on both sides of the debate. And I think there's an element of truth to that sense of division is being sowed. Mm-hmm. Now, whether the SPFL are doing that deliberately or not, that's not for me to say. The boys clearly think that it's part of a campaign to deliberately sow that division between fans. I would characterise it as the SPFL trying to be seen to do something and going in pretty heavy-handed and, rolling out this new series of punishments and trying to set a baseline of, look, everyone knows how this will transpire moving forward if pyrotechnics are used. And I just think it's not a progressive action from the SPFL. It's not conducive to productive ways forward for the relationship between governing bodies in this country, clubs in this country, and regular supporters, who are the lifeblood of football in this country as far as I'm concerned. And yes, there are things to discuss around the use of pyrotechnics and a sensible way forward for all parties. I don't think collective banning is particularly conducive to success in that regard. I don't think it's a successful way of clamping down on the use of pyrotechnics. And I guess that would be my point, is that if you really do have a problem with this use of pyro, surely you would want to use methods that were useful in restricting its use. And I don't think these methods are, frankly. Hazel saying, totally against both points. Pyrotechnics are against the rules. Everyone knows this. We don't have an argument there. Totally against not supporting your team. Smacks of cutting off your nose to spoil your face. Crazy. And listen, there will be an element of that. And this is kind of what we're talking about, in the sense of it creates a debate that isn't even about pyrotechnics ultimately. So if the SPFL are wanting to take this collective action and restrict the use of pyrotechnics, they're doing it in a way that just doesn't forward the debate around the use of them, as far as I'm concerned, personally. And so in terms of the Green Brigade, Ryan, they were a little bit more layered with their response to things. So obviously they did get their allocation cut and they're not going. Now, part of that is because of this collective action thing, but in their statement, they also suggested that part of it is the ongoing rancour around the direction of the club and the club's engagement with supporters. So in their statement, they said, as a result of the ticket allocation reduction at the upcoming League Cup semi-final, the Green Brigade has received no ticket allocation. Although we wholeheartedly reject the notion of collective punishment and have regularly defied similar suspensions in the past, we will not be attending this match. We believe that the Celtic support is at a watershed moment for unity and capacity to enact positive change at our club. We are committed to this goal and the development of the Celtic Fans Collective, which is the best available apparatus for improving the experience of all Celtic fans. Collective punishment is an unfair practice that has repeatedly been used against football supporters for a variety of reasons to force conformity and sow division. They continue, irrespective of any perceived concerns, the best solutions will always be reached through meaningful supporter engagement and not through draconian sanctions. There is a persistent common thread running through Scottish football of poor fan relations, with Celtic sitting top of the table. In a further demonstration of the detachment from fans' fairness and transparency, Celtic FC has sold an undisclosed amount of standard tickets as hospitality packages for this match, priced between £150 and £300. This legalised ticket touting exposes the club's desire to exploit supporter demand and sow unnecessary division between fans. Finally, we thank Boys Celtic for another gesture of solidarity and rejection of unfair fan practices. So listen, they're taking a wider view of this as this is more encompassing of the general feeling around supporter relations in Scotland right now, and principally because they're a Celtic fans group, that relates to Celtic first and foremost for them and for many others. And this underlines that regardless of any meetings and any protests that have taken place over the last couple of months, it's going to continue, Ryan. We know that. Now, the Celtic Fan Collective have another meeting with the original signatories of the open letter to the club this evening, I believe, and they will be discussing forward strategies. I think they'll be reviewing what they've done previously and kind of looking to move forward positively, because as we know, the outcome of the recent meeting with the club, there was no progress from either side really on improving relations, Ryan. So the Green Brigade taking a kind of wider view and making the point that this isn't just about not being allowed into Hampden, it's part of their perception of a wider problem with how fans are treated in this country.
Yeah, and for a lot of their points, you can't help but agree with a lot of the points that they're making about the way that fans are treated. For example, and I'll just take myself into, if you go to other countries, as a spectator, on the whole, you generally do get treated better than you do in Scotland. I've had that experience pretty recently, going to a different continent, and it's night and day with how you experience things, going to a match, feel welcome at a match, whereas a load of different things in Scottish football, the way that you travel to games, the way that sometimes you can be tightly packed together, the talk of the pyrotechnics, even the point that the Green Brigade were making about the hospitality packages, supporters having to spend more to get a hospitality package just to guarantee a ticket because they've got more money than other fans. That then, I do agree with that point, that does cause division. So yeah, they have taken a wider stance. It's more of a wider stance than the Boys Celtic one, but I thought both statements were well written, as you would expect. They take their time with these statements. They clearly set out their intentions. They don't leave you second guessing as to what they're thinking, which is admirable, I would say, because you don't want any doubt. The statements are statements for them. Yeah, it'll be a disappointment that the Green Brigade and the Boys Celtic aren't at the game, as I've mentioned previously. It'll hurt the atmosphere, and I think it doesn't. The 500 tickets and the wider issues just don't help at the moment with what's going on with Celtic and the supporters. It's just another layer added on to this unrest that's happening just now between the support and the hierarchy and the club as a whole. So, yeah. In terms of this meeting tonight, I'm curious to see what comes out of that. I'm sure they'll be talking about what measures they'll be taking next in terms of protests against Dundee and the upcoming games as well. Because, as you said, the meeting between the club and the Celtic Fans Collective and other supporters groups, it was a bit of a stalemate. It ended in a stalemate between the two sides, both sides thinking different things after the conclusion of that meet-up. So you would expect further protests to happen, which is unfortunate, but I think we could all see it coming, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate to an extent, but I also think Celtic are supposed to be the leaders in the situation, and they should be shown the leadership to have made a meaningful bridge to kind of arrest the idea of any further protests. Now, Celtic say they arranged that meeting partly in consultation with the football staff at Celtic, who had shown concerns that protests would effectively impact the team moving forward. I don't think anyone wanted a silent Celtic Park, for example. Others have taken a more cynical view of why Celtic arranged that meeting, and I understand that as well. And listen, I think for me, again, the reason I'm not going into the pyro debate specifically is because I think regardless of your view of pyro, surely it's about finding solutions for the betterment of everyone, really. And I don't think blanket banning really is that. And likewise, the relationship between the supporter and the club, I don't think a stalemate is productive in terms of solving any issues at Celtic. Now, Ryan, one of the things I've been thinking about this week is this concept of a Celtic fan advisory board. And if anyone's read the minutes of the meeting, then they would know that Celtic said they have been considering this of late at the club. Now, fan advisory boards were kind of born from the UK government's review into football and fan engagement in 2021, I think. And then the Premier League rolled out these recommendations of these fan engagement initiatives. And one of that is having a fan advisory board that is meaningful and can hold the club to account on fan-facing issues. And that comes down to issues such as ticket allocations, such as hospitality packages being replacing regular tickets, etc. These are live issues. Stuff like stadium, how the stadium operates, the match day experience, all the things that Celtic fans have been discussing this season, even out with the furore around transfers and the football strategy of the club. There's been lots of other issues that fans are discussing, and a fan advisory board, I think, can help with those non-footballing matters. It's my belief that could, if Celtic do it in the right way, and obviously that's a big if. Now, what would that look like? Well, essentially how it functions in the best way in England is they have these boards made up of different fan representatives. Now, they also have someone on the Celtic board, one of the non-executive directors who takes leadership on the project and oversees the fan advisory board, showing that it's not just a tick box exercise and that someone is held accountable for the success and development of it. They also allow the board of the chair of any fan advisory board to also attend board meetings from time to time on issues that are fan facing, such as tickets, such as all of the stuff we were just talking about there. I think those two things would be a meaningful step forward, because it's a million miles away from what Celtic currently do, which is this fans forum, which they arrange every few months, but they don't release the minutes for close to a year at times, and it is a tick box exercise. There's no accountability, there's no real follow-up or visible action points that are followed up on. So I guess my point around all of this, Ryan, is if Celtic do want to actually listen to supporters, they will take tangible steps forward in that. If they just want to be seen to listen to supporters, what they will do is continue to try and arrange these meetings where nothing is really said and nothing is really followed up on, and nobody on the board is really accountable for fan engagement or fan relationships. And Celtic need to start taking this seriously for me, because it starts to put at risk revenue coming into the club, and from a business perspective, that is obviously a bad thing. And the board are there to serve the business interests of the club. Ultimately, that is their remit, So this isn't just a fan moaning issue. It's not just a football strategy issue. There's a wide range of issues here that Celtic need to get a grip of and start showing a new modern mentality on, for me.
Yeah, it's not anything revolutionary either. It's not as if it would be the first of its kind. It really is. I mean, you talk about the fans forum and it being a tick box exercise. It was a tick box exercise without actually ticking the box if the minutes aren't available for the fans to read after it happens. For what, nearly a year you were saying that the minutes weren't available. That's just not. It's just not helpful in this whole snowball effect that's been building up, and it's came to a head recently because fans have had enough, and it's because of the way things have been going on the park. Then off-field issues start to take more importance because everybody's looking at all of the things that Celtic are doing wrong, of which clearly there are many. So having a fan advisory board would be handy, just to have that middle ground between the supporters and the hierarchy, and having somebody that, and as you said, and I agree with that, and with fan issues, some issues they wouldn't be able to sit in because that's confidentiality, and fine, I get that completely. But having somebody to make the point for the fans in those board meetings could be so effective and so needed, to be honest. The fans do need a voice, and the fans are getting louder and louder with every passing day with their unrest for the board. And I think I just feel like it would be in Celtic's best interest to start making these things a reality, before it gets worse. Like, for example, last night, and I'm going to bring another real world, a real world example into it. I was in a shopping centre last night, and I walked past the Celtic Superstore in Braehead, and it was completely empty. There's always people in the Celtic Superstore, and it was completely empty. Nobody in it. Which kind of just summed up the way.
New store. I've heard similar about the new store in the city centre as well. There's been an adverse reaction from some to this new, which I have to note, like, people have been talking about the expensive nature of the new Adidas gear that's coming out. The idea around that range is it is a collector's edition thing, I think, Ryan. You might know more about it than me. I'm not up to my date on fashion, as you can imagine. But I think the idea around that range is that it is limited in numbers and that the prices are high as a result. I'm not defending Celtic in that sense, but that is the point of that range. It's a more fashionable range, I believe, Ryan.
And Adidas will likely determine the prices of them as well, due to the fact that they're collector's edition. There will be an agreement between probably the club and the manufacturers, but because it's Adidas, they will.
It doesn't look good though, does it, Ryan?
No.
It doesn't look good when all
doesn't
these
help
issues
the
are going
situation.
on, and
a lot of
Celtic are releasing hoodies or whatever that were £230. Like that's not conducive to this relationship improving either.
Yeah, I saw a comment saying that the entire outfit that Kieran Tierney was wearing, and I would need to double check this and verify because I only read it on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, it was something like £500 to wear the outfit that Kieran Tierney was wearing in the picture. So, you know, even at this time of year as well, I mean, that's a lot of money anyway, but we're heading into Christmas time. Asking fans to fork out that amount of money is quite an ask, to be honest. I just noticed that last night, and I was like, you know, you always walk past a Celtic store and there's people in it, but I just looked in and I was almost like, it looks completely bare and empty, and it kind of summed up the whole feeling at the moment. And I think there'll be loads of fans that'll be feeling that way. They'll be going past a Celtic shop and be like, you know, with the way that things are transpiring at the moment, I won't bother going and getting the new collection. I won't go and bother getting the new home top just because they feel that apathy.
And listen, that's the point I made. I've been talking about this quite consistently and writing about this consistently. This idea of the Celtic fans financially, you know, supporting the club, and it actually doesn't take a lot for that to reduce quite dramatically. It doesn't take a grand boycott of Adidas gear or tickets or whatever to affect the club's bottom line on this stuff. Like that's the reality of it. It just takes a group of fans to go, right, I'm not buying an extra shirt this year, I'm not buying an extra polo shirt this year, I'm not buying a League Cup ticket, I'm not buying a Europa League ticket. Like it comes in small amounts, but because the Celtic support is so vast, and I think you can sense the feeling amongst the wider support. If it's not anger, then it's at least, God, I'm a bit fed up with this at the moment, because this isn't what we're enjoying. And just on the fan advisory board now, it should be clear that Celtic haven't committed to forming this yet. It's just in the initial planning stages. And look, what I will say is, like, my understanding is that the club haven't just done this as a reaction to the protests this season. I believe the concept of a fan advisory board has been kicking about internally at Celtic for quite a while. So they're not just doing it in reaction to this, but it's an opportunity, I believe, in this moment, which is, I think, a crisis of their own making, to take positive steps forward. It's an opportunity for me. Now, George Campbell, who's Celtic's head of legal and governance, explained in the fans meeting that there's an ongoing review of the practicalities of a fan advisory board, and that will include further discussions with clubs in England who operate similar structures. And again, they've not only not committed to these plans, they've not committed to the timeline for these plans either. But I think they said they were going to come back to the various fan groups about the concept of a fan advisory board going forward. And I would be very surprised if the Celtic Fans Collective don't push now for this as part of a goal, as part of an outcome. And maybe that's what this next stage of protest needs. I think we need tangible outcomes. Now, you could say the broader outcome of, you know, deposing Michael Nicholson, Michael Nicholson leaving the club, Chris Mackay leaving the club, that is their goal, and that's what they're going for. I think some maybe shorter term, more reasonable goals that the club can agree to might be a good way forward as well. You can have the long term goal of wider board change, but you can also have shorter term goals that are tangible and can be delivered in the medium term that will effectively or ostensibly improve the experience of being a Celtic supporter.
Yeah, and small victories add up at the end of the day, and getting these things passed through a fan advisory board, better communication with the club through their social media channels to the supporters, having more of an open door when it comes to things that are going on within the club. I'm well aware that not everything can be spoke about between the hierarchy and the support, but if there is that better dialogue between the two, or a better understanding of what can be said between the two parties, then I think these can all be taken as small victories. Yes, they want longer term change in the boardroom. They want the removal of certain people in that boardroom. But I do agree with you that smaller victories add up. And if there's ways in which the club can get to a better place and a better relationship with the fans, because let's be honest, the relationship between the fans and the board just now is one of the lowest it's been in a long time, unfortunately. So they need to go about their way. They need to go out of their way to make things better and more harmonious between themselves and the people who, at the end of the day, are spending the money to have these people in their positions that actually support the club day in, day out, that buy the merchandise, that go to the games, that eat the food at the games as well. It's important that they keep them happy, because if the fans aren't happy, we all know about it in the stadiums. It's very clear, and it's not the greatest atmosphere to be around, to be honest with you. There was a point that I was going to make, but it's completely went out of my head. This is what happens when you've got about 20 ideas going on in your head. But there's a lot of change that needs needed.
Mark McQueen asking, what is it that people want to happen to make things better? Break it down for me. I get this point of view. I get there's might be confusion, but what do fans actually want? The things I'm seeing consistently, one of them is upgrades and improvements to the stadium. Now, that doesn't mean rebuilding the stadium. That just means like modernising certain aspects of it. I see a lot of complaints about the general matchday experience at Celtic not being up to par. And I think if you have a fan representative or a fans board who can put forward and collate the list of issues and survey people meaningfully in a way that isn't being gatekept by the club, I think would be important. Another thing is just stuff around the pricing of games. Now, in the one example of this is the Europa League games, for instance. The initial game didn't have any concession prices for the general sale tickets. Now they've changed that slightly, so the tickets that are going on sale to season ticket, the extra tickets that are going on sale to season tickets at the moment do have concession prices, but still the ones that are on general sales to non-season ticket holders, which we know there are many Celtic fans who don't have a season ticket, there are no concession prices. Now you might see that as a small thing, but these are things that are meaningful to people on a day-to-day basis about whether they can afford to go to Celtic Park or not. When you just set a blanket price for all tickets, regardless of your circumstances or your age or etc., I think that sends the wrong message first and foremost, but I think it also impacts the pockets of supporters. And again, it's these kind of issues that I feel like a fan advisory board might be able to, first of all, offer Celtic more guidance on what the feeling of the support is on these issues, and help Celtic come to more a meaningful relationship with their supporter base, which, as I keep underlining, generate the income for the club on a yearly basis or an annual basis. I also just think, Simon making the point here, I just think there's a general malaise has settled over the fan base just now. I do agree with that, and I think I think a conflict at times, Ryan, is natural between a passionate fan base and a board of a PLC. The board of a PLC have business interests. They have considerations that maybe your average day-to-day fan does not have. And I think that conflict is natural. But what has happened and why this malaise has existed is because that conflict has risen and Celtic are not addressing any of the concerns in a serious manner. And when that happens, malaise and apathy creeps in, and that is damaging to the entire football club. And I think that's what it is for me as much as anything. As well as a really in-depth briefing on what the tactical strategy of the club is moving forward, what the football strategy is of the club moving forward. They can have these sound bites about creating Champions League players and becoming a Champions League team and qualifying for Europe 19 out of the last 20 seasons, all they want. It doesn't wash with the majority of supporters when they've seen Celtic's dismal qualification record in the Champions League. It's stuff like this, I feel like, that is adding to this malaise in general, which I think the club can take leadership and ownership of and not be afraid of the conflict with supporters. The conflict with supporters is a natural byproduct of what the club is and how it is built. but you can't be afraid of it. You've got to build the processes around it to, come to solutions on some of it, not all of it. There's not going to be magic fixes to all the issues Celtic fans have issues with, but at least try and meet them on a middle ground.
Yeah, and both sides. I don't think it can be doubted or debated that both sides of this maybe conflict. Conflict. I'll write conflict between the two, and they're not. It's not physical, but it's protests are happening. Both sides are passionate for, or they should be, or at least one side is passionate, or they want Celtic to succeed as a football club, both on and off the pitch. It's just the perception just now seems that the board don't want that as much as the fans do. So that's the perception that a lot of people are getting from the outside looking in. They look at they look at the transfers that were made, the timing of the transfers. A lot of it goes back to just what's happening on the pitch as well. When Celtic don't qualify for the Champions League, there is a natural reaction of anger because Celtic supporters have been used to the Champions League for the past 3-4 years. Yes, they got in there automatically due to the coefficient. But when you're a Champions League team and you don't make it into the Champions League the following season, I know Celtic, people can say you should be playing in the Europa League, but they have been playing in the Champions League. They've been regulars the past 3 years prior to this season. When that doesn't happen, naturally you will hear a reaction and a response from the fans. It's just those other I'm not even going to call them smaller issues. They're issues that were going on in the background. They then come to the forefront because of what's then happening on the pitch. And it's that snowball effect that I keep on talking about. The snowball gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And there's just fans that are just at the tipping point with it all. And that's why these protests and these demands for change have happened, because unfortunately the club have not learned their lessons from a few years back where they failed to communicate with the fans. Yes, there was a bit of goodwill between the two, despite maybe some annoyances still being there from a couple of years back. But now they've come to the fore, and fans. The difference this time is that the board need to hear the fans, because the fans are at the games. The fans are available to do things now, rather than what the case 5 years ago. That's the main difference, and that's why I think there's more anger, because these things have happened before, but now the fans are more mobilised to try and enact change. And I think that's why it's more heated than what it was before.
And let's be honest, Ange bailed them out in terms of the relationship with supporters, because Ange was a force of nature. Celtic fans got behind him in a big way. They really bought into his mentality and his ethos and the way he handled himself in the media and the press, and he was a figurehead of that kind of process of rebuilding after the disaster of the failed 10-in-a-row season. Rebuilding might be an extreme word to some, given it was one season out of many that Celtic didn't win the league, but it was a rebuilding process in terms of the feeling of supporters and how they feel about the team and the team moving forward. And Ange was a figurehead of that. Everyone else at Celtic, all the other leaders at Celtic, drifted into the background, and suddenly they find themselves caught in this kind of maelstrom of their own making, when they've been so used to taking a backseat in all of this and being able to get by with little accountability and with little service to what the wider support think of them. They do these fans forums meeting, they answer questions now and again, but they're not visible in any meaningful sense. And Brendan Rodgers came in and has tried to take on that figurehead, but he's also not the same character as Ange. He has different attributes as a manager and as a coach, I believe. And I think a lot of his ethos and a lot of his mentality really works on players, and it works on fans to an extent. A lot of people like Brendan Rodgers, no doubt about that, but he's not the same kind of unifying figure for me. He does try to come out with comments on unity, and even this week he was speaking about the need for unity at Celtic. On all of this ongoing in his message to supporters ahead of the next block of matches, he said, "Let's embrace all the challenges that come our way, both domestically and in Europe. It's a really exciting period, and it's what Celtic is all about, playing in these games and playing in the big games. For us, it's that collective being together is always the attitude that we want to show. We're excited by these games. We want to go in and embrace the challenges. Everyone together fighting for the same cause is what Celtic is about." And I guess the manager and the players will again find themselves caught in the middle of all this. Now, we don't know what format future protests are going to take. We don't know if there's going to be more silent protests. We don't. I would be surprised if there's going to be, because again, that ended up being a point of contention for many fans. But we don't know what protest there's going to be, and it could have an effect on how the feeling of the game is, and Celtic players will have to manage that situation. I guess the atmosphere at Hampden will be impacted to the degree, Ryan. Now, listen, a derby semi-final at Hampden, the atmosphere should take care of itself, but I still think it will have a little bit of an impact, especially if Celtic are selling half them as hospitality tickets. Not half them, that was just a bit of hyperbole there, but if Celtic are selling a bunch of them as hospitality tickets over the Ultras groups, then naturally the atmosphere will be impacted.
Yeah, and I talk about the organisation of the fan groups when it comes to even singing songs as well. A lot of it will come naturally, and yes, I do agree with you, the point that the Glasgow Derby does take care of itself from an atmospheric point of view, but having those fans there that are designated singers, they start the chants, they'll make things happen, they'll G the team on. Yes, you'll still get that from some supporters, but having that organisation, sometimes I feel that Celtic supporters need that organisation when it comes to the fans, to get them going. I think fans do want to sing at games, they want to back their team, but having that group there to start those chants, to orchestrate everything, I think it hinders Celtic going into that game, at least in an atmospheric point of view, and I do think that the crowd play a big part. I still think there'll be a good atmosphere. Rangers will be hampered with that, with the fact that they've lost 500 of their fans for the game, which could be a bit of a leveller between the two supports. But it'll be an interesting one to gauge when you're at the game. I'm going to be keen and interested to see how the two supports back their team, because at the end of the day it is a Glasgow derby and fans will be desperate for their team to win because it's a rivalry. As I said, it takes care of itself.
Yeah, it'll take care of itself. David saying, John, the board are creating the conflict, no one else. Listen, I agree with that. Apologies if it's come across differently. I'm not trying to portray it any other way. I mean, I did say it's on Celtic to take ownership of these issues and show the leadership required to navigate this current split with the a fair chunk of supporters. It's not every Celtic supporter, we know that, but it's enough, I think, to have not only an effect on the feeling around the club, but also on the club's bottom line at the end of the day. And I would be very surprised if revenue generated by supporters this season is not significantly down on last season. And that's not just because of the Champions League. That's because of a lot of stuff ongoing at the moment, and Celtic's failure to engage with supporters in a way that resonates with supporters. And Celtic are paid a lot of money to do that. They've got a large staff, they've got a big board, and many of whom are very well paid, not least Michael Nicholson, who is the club's chief executive. He oversees the day-to-day running of the club, but part of that is ensuring that your customer base is happy and healthy and moving forward with the goals of the club. And it's not right now. Regardless of how you view all of this and where you land on any aspect of this debate, it's absolutely undeniable that there is a schism between the supporter and the club right now, and it is on Celtic. I fully agree with David. It is on Celtic to take ownership of that.
Completely, yeah. I just hope that they're as far away as that is what it might be just now, that there can be a unifying process between all parties. I don't know how that transpires at this moment in time. Does tangible change need to tangible change need to happen before that can be realised? Does there need to be more protest before the board get the message that changes have to be made? Either way, just bringing it back to what's happening on the field, Celtic are going through a 7-game period in 21 days. It's a massive time for the club, and I like talking about the protest and that, and as much as anybody, I think it's important news, but it's a really important time for the team on the park as well. Completely understand why the protests are transpiring. It's not ideal in this moment, and I just wish in an ideal world everybody would be on the same boat for these upcoming fixtures. It just feels like with all the protests that are going on just now, everybody's well within their right to protest. I just think it makes the task a lot more difficult, and there's a lot more pressure going into games. Between that, and you also add the general atmosphere going to home games at the moment. I think that's the last 3 or 4 I've been at, walking to Celtic Park, going to the Velodrome. And listen, I agree with you with the stadium redevelopments. I think that Celtic Park looks dated in some areas, both inside and out of the stadium, which is really concerning. And I don't think enough has been done there. But just the general atmosphere going about Celtic Park at the moment, it's muted. And this feels like a real business end of the season already for Celtic, and a lot of competitions. Push needs to come to shove in some of the results that they get on the park, but off the park there does seem to be that general malaise and apathy going to games as if it's habitual rather than something that you're enjoying doing at the moment. Now that can be improved in a number of ways, but I think some of the stuff that's happened off the park, if there can be a little bit of unity between the two divided groups, then I think people will get more of a buzz going to the games on the park. I feel like the off-field stuff is hampering the general experience of going to watch Celtic at the moment, and that's on the board to fix that.
Yeah, and listen, I sympathise with the viewpoint that this fan stuff is doing everyone's head, and I get that. I totally get that, actually. And from time to time,
it is the main story, John. Just now, it's the main story at Celtic, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm not apologising for that. We've talked about it today. I'm just reinforcing that we will have to talk about it from time to time, because this is the reality of where the club are at the moment. And until the club start to take ownership and leadership on these issues, then it will continue rumbling on in the background, and it will come to these things where we have to spend 40 minutes talking about it, and we can't ignore what's going on. And again, I'm not trying to justify because I'm confident that we're talking about the right things today. We will be focused on football tomorrow. I'll be on with Tony tomorrow morning, and we'll be very much focused on Celtic's next 7 fixtures, specifically against Dundee at the weekend. I mean, this is what's coming up, Ryan, and we know this is a challenge. We know the difficulties that are involved here. There's, at least there's at least 4 games where you're looking at you definitely don't know that Celtic are going to come out of it unscathed. Against Dundee at the weekend, look, I think Dundee look like one of the lesser teams in the Premiership this season. I think that's fair to say, without being disrespectful to them. You would hope that Celtic are able to comfortably take care of them. Again, there's no guarantees in the Premiership at the moment, and Celtic have to put in the energy into the performance to guarantee that win. But then you're looking at Sturm Graz and Hearts, very, very difficult games. Sturm Graz obviously just beat Rangers, and they're hoping to make progress in the Europa League. And we saw against Braga how difficult even a home game in the Europa League can be. Hearts at Tynecastle, again, massive, massive game, and Rangers and Midtjylland on in close succession as well. It's just this is a slightly worrying set of 7 fixtures for a lot of people, Ryan, I think. Now, without talking Celtic down too much, it doesn't fill you with confidence going into this next block.
No, and I think just looking at those fixtures there, this is now the first time that we've seen the Europa League making a massive impact on Celtic's fixtures. I just look at that Sturm Graz game at home on the 23rd, which is a Thursday, and then they're playing Hearts away 3 days later on the 26th. If that was a Champions League game, there would have been more time. And I bring that into the next point, which is Hearts aren't playing European football, so they've got a whole week to prepare for that. I'm not making excuses before we start.
No, but it just adds a layer of challenge, doesn't it? I mean, it's undeniable that a heavy fixture schedule is tougher than not, and Hearts so motivated at the moment. And listen, I think the Hearts thing is interesting. I don't think Hearts have been a blow-away team in terms of performance this season. They've been grinding out some wins, as have Celtic, I should add. It's not just Hearts that are doing that. They're showing spirit to get through these matches, and the hope is that in time Hearts start to fall away, and hopefully Celtic can accelerate that process at Tynecastle. But the point is, they're very motivated at the moment. They are top of the table for a reason, and they will be looking at that game against Celtic as a massive certainly their biggest game for quite a while, Ryan. Especially if they aren't defeated before then.
So Hearts play Kilmarnock on Saturday before Celtic play Dundee. Now that's going to be a difficult game for Hearts, because Kilmarnock, if anybody's seen the league table, Kilmarnock have started really well under Stuart Kettle. Well, we saw them. We saw them play well against Celtic at Rugby Park, and were really unlucky not to win the game, no less lose the game in the last minute due to that penalty. So that's a difficult game. But if Hearts win that, they go 5 points clear, and Celtic then have more pressure on themselves on Sunday against Dundee at Dens Park, which there's already pressure on Celtic due to the off-field stuff, due to the fact that it's going back into the Scottish Premiership, coming back from the international break, players coming back from injury. There's already pressure on them. So it's a must-win. I mean, Dundee away is a must-win for Celtic. Most games are must-wins for Celtic in the Scottish Premiership, but there'll be a little bit more pressure, especially after that game. We'll see what happens between Hearts and Kilmarnock. But yeah, every game there. I mean, if Celtic were in a better place, both on and off the pitch, you would feel a lot more confident going into these games. But unfortunately, due to the way that they're playing and due to the off-field things that are happening, which naturally can affect what's transpiring on the field of play, you just don't feel as confident as what you were. Celtic just don't feel as if they're in the best place at the moment, despite there being an international break and they've not played in nearly 2 weeks. At the moment, they don't feel as if they're in the best possible shape for tackling a tough fixture list. So you're hoping that they can turn it on, that they can find a bit of form, that they can find good performances again, performances as well as results in those games. I think both are just as important on Sunday. Yes, they need to win the game, but I also think that Celtic need to show something and show that they've got that good performance in them, something to build on ahead of Sturm Graz and in that massive game at Hearts at Tynecastle next weekend.
Listen, we'll be talking a lot more about the football tomorrow, everyone. So if you're wanting a change of pace from the fan stuff, tune in then. I'll be on with Tony. We'll be talking directly about Dundee and all the challenges ahead. There's lots going up on the website. If you want to know more about fan advisory boards and all that, I do have an article up there at the moment. It's in the top slot. If you go into celticway.co.uk, you can check that out. We've got a feature on Simpson Pusey coming tomorrow morning. We've got the weekly youth column. I think there's some interesting information in that around Paul Tisdale's speech to some of the youth players at Lennoxtown over the last wee while that Josh McCafferty's reporting on. So we've got that going up, and lots more besides. Yeah, interesting times, Ryan. I'm glad to get the football back. I'm glad it's ramping up again, and we'll be there to cover it all. I think this will be the last time you're on the briefing this week, Ryan, so I hope you have a good few days, and we'll see you again. And hopefully Celtic get back to winning ways soon. Or not back to winning ways, hopefully Celtic continue winning and getting back to their strong ways, should I say. Ryan.
Yeah, good performance, good win. Get back-to-back wins as well. It feels like a while since we've said that for Celtic at the moment. Get back-to-back wins, make them feel good about themselves. I think a really good performance against Dundee, a show of togetherness on the pitch, with some of the new players adding a little bit of quality to the team, could go a long way in making people feel a lot better about the way the club's going at the moment. And listen, it's an away game. Celtic will bring their crowd, they'll bring their fans, it'll be a good atmosphere. People will be hungry for the football. I just hope that Celtic can match that hunger and appetite and get the 3 points. We'll see what happens between Hearts and Kilmarnock, but it's all about Celtic. Just keep on winning, and naturally I think results and positions in the table will naturally change as a result.
Great stuff. Thanks everyone in the live chat. I appreciate all of you. Some lively comments today, some back and forth between some of you. I do see it. I enjoy the live chat, even the ones who are cheeky to us. I see you, but I appreciate you as well. No, in all seriousness, thanks for joining us. Leave a comment below how you're feeling about going back into this next block of 7 games with all the stuff going on around the club at the moment. As I say, I think there's a Celtic Collective fan meeting this evening, so we might hear some more of that in the coming days as well. We'll hopefully find out if there is going to be protest action, what it's going to be as well, although sometimes they do like to keep that close to their chest for an element of surprise. We also have Celtic's AGM coming up next month as well, so all of this is going to continue, and we'll be here to cover it all. As I say, I'm back on tomorrow morning with Tony, and we'll see you again then. Thanks for joining us, and see you next time.